My name is Lucas, and I never thought I'd be the guy standing in an anger management support group, knees shaking, palms sweating, ready to bare my soul to a room full of strangers. But life has a funny way of unraveling in the most spectacularly cruel ways, doesn't it? The clock on the wall ticked with an exaggerated, almost mocking rhythm. I could feel a dozen pairs of eyes on me, men from all walks of life who, like me, were trying to hold their cracked lives together. I cleared my throat, wishing I could disappear, but then I reminded myself why I was here. Why I had to be here. My hands clenched into fists, the nails biting into my palms. I forced myself to speak. "My name is Lucas," I began, my voice barely a whisper. "And I'm here because I just found out my wife, Emily, has been cheating on me." A few heads nodded. There was a shared understanding in this room, a silent pact that we'd all been dragged through hell in different ways. The words hung in the air, but saying them didn't make the knife twist in my gut any less painful. For a moment, I thought I could just sit back down and vanish into the circle. But no, the words were like floodgates, and everything I'd bottled up for days threatened to pour out. It wasn't just an affair. It was a performance. A double life. The air felt too thick to breathe. I closed my eyes and let the memory take me back to that cursed evening. I hadn't been snooping. No, I was just coming home early from work, some random Tuesday, the kind you forget 5 minutes after it happens. I was ready to unwind, pour a glass of whiskey, and pretend that life hadn't turned monotonous. I walked in the door, the scent of Emily's perfume still fresh in the air, her laughter echoing from the kitchen. Her phone was on the counter, screen lit up with an incoming call. It wasn't until I heard the name that I froze. Jack. Jack. Her boss. I leaned closer. The call went to voicemail, and before I knew it, a notification popped up, a text, casual yet intimate. "Miss you already. Counting the hours till our trip. Can't wait for the fun with V." My heart slammed against my ribs. The world around me blurred as I swiped up, hands trembling, and unlocked her phone. I didn't even have to try hard, she'd left her passcode unchanged. There they were, messages upon messages, each one stabbing deeper than the last. I scrolled through conversations I shouldn't have been reading. Plans for a business trip that wasn't about contracts or clients. No, it was about hotel rooms, about bodies tangled together, about things she'd never whispered to me in the dark. And then there was Veronica, Jack's secretary, wrapped up in their sordid triangle. And then I made the worst decision of all. I hit play on a voice message. Emily's voice, sultry and carefree, filled the room. "Don't forget to book the suite with the jacuzzi. And tell Veronica to pack that little red number, you know the one." I felt something break inside me. A brittle, splintering sound that I'm pretty sure was my sanity. My hands shook, but I hit record on my phone, capturing the audio, the words, the treachery. I needed proof, I told myself. I needed to know I wasn't crazy. But knowing didn't help. The rage built like a storm, pressing against my chest, demanding to be let out. My knees gave way, and I collapsed onto the cold tile floor, my breath coming in shallow gasps. A sound escaped me, a half-sob, half-roar of anguish. I was still lost in that moment when I heard someone cough in the support group. The memory shattered, and I was back in the room, all eyes fixed on me. A tear burned its way down my cheek, but I didn't care. My voice cracked as I spoke. The worst part is, my throat closed, but I forced it open. The worst part is that I still hoped the baby was mine. I thought maybe, just maybe, we could salvage something. But that phone call, it killed that hope. A collective shudder ran through the room. Someone muttered, "Damn," under his breath. I sucked in a breath, trying to steady myself. My heart hammered like it was trying to break free of my chest. I felt like bolting, like running until the world blurred away. But two men on either side of me, grizzled, broken, but strong in their own way, each put a hand on my shoulder. "Keep going," one of them whispered. "You are here now. Get it out." So I did. My voice wavered, my resolve teetered on the edge, but I laid it all bare. The call, the recording, the quiet destruction of everything I thought my life was. The sense that I was standing in the ruins, unsure of what came next. When I finally finished, silence engulfed the room. My chest heaved, and for the first time, I felt the tiniest bit of weight lift from my shoulders. I was no longer just a man drowning alone. I was part of something bigger now, a circle of men who knew what it meant to have their lives ripped apart and still find a way to stand up. I took a shaky breath and looked around. The storm was far from over, but at least now, I wasn't facing it alone. The group meeting ended, and I walked out into the crisp night air, feeling hollowed out but oddly steady. The raw pain had spilled out, but in its place, a cold clarity settled. I wasn't going to let Emily and her puppeteer boss tear my life apart while I stood by, broken and silent. No, they wanted a puppet show. They were about to see what happens when the strings get cut. I drove home, the weight of the recording on my phone burning a hole in my pocket. Each passing streetlight cast flickering shadows on the dashboard, reflections of the thoughts darting through my mind. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't confronting Emily, not yet. She'd perfected the art of deception. Confronting her now would just tip my hand, and I needed to play this game smart. I grabbed my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and called the one person who'd have my back no matter what. "Ryan, you there?" My voice sounded foreign, stretched taut with suppressed rage. "Lucas?" "Yeah, what's up?" Ryan's voice, roughened by years of construction work, carried a warmth that reminded me of simpler times when the biggest problem we had was sneaking beers past Dad. "I need your help. And your discretion." Ryan didn't hesitate. "Name it." I hesitated, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Emily's cheating. I have proof. But I need more. I need everything." The line went silent. When he spoke again, his voice was steel. "I'll be there in 20. True to his word, Ryan showed up, his truck rumbling to a stop in front of the house. He stepped out, his broad shoulders tense under his jacket. The moment he saw me, he pulled me into a rough hug. No words, just the solid, unwavering presence of a brother who understood everything I couldn't yet say. We settled in the living room, the weight of what I was about to do settling like lead in my stomach. I handed Ryan my phone and played the recording. As Emily's voice slithered through the speakers, Ryan's jaw clenched, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the armrest. When it ended, he exhaled sharply. "That's vile. You okay?" "No," I said flatly. "But I will be." Ryan nodded, eyes dark with determination. "What's the plan?" I looked around the house I'd poured my sweat and time into, the home I'd built for a family that turned out to be a mirage. "I want proof. Ironclad. I want to see her lies bleed out on paper, on video, in a way she can't deny." A grim smile touched Ryan's lips. "I know a guy. He does surveillance work, quiet, thorough. We'll wire up the house." "Every room," I said, my voice cold. "I want eyes everywhere." Ryan nodded. "We'll do it right. You'll get your proof." The next morning, Ryan arrived with his subcontractors. They weren't just builders, they were men who knew how to handle delicate jobs, the kind that required discretion. We started with the living room, tucking tiny cameras into the recesses of light fixtures, behind vents, and inside bookshelves. The devices were small, undetectable to anyone who wasn't looking. We moved through the house like shadows, the only sound the occasional scrape of a screwdriver or the soft click of a drill. I felt a twisted satisfaction watching each camera slip into place. Emily had turned our home into her playground, now it would be my battlefield. As we worked, Ryan's eyes flicked toward me, concern breaking through his hard exterior. "You sure about this, Lucas? Once you see it, there's no going back." I met his gaze, the resolve in my chest hardening like concrete. "I need to know. All of it." He didn't ask again. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the house was wired. A small, black monitor sat in my office, displaying real-time feeds from every angle. Ryan leaned back, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's done." I swallowed, my throat tight. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." He hesitated, then added, "You have a lawyer?" "Yeah. I've got an appointment tomorrow morning." "Good. Make sure they know everything." "I will." As Ryan left, the house settled into a tense silence. I sat in front of the monitor, the screens reflecting back the familiar spaces I'd once filled with laughter and love. Now they were just rooms, empty, waiting, like traps set in the dead of night. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Kate Sullivan. Her eyes were sharp, her tone sharper. I laid out the facts, the recording, and the plan for gathering evidence. She listened without interrupting, her pen scratching notes in a leather-bound book. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "You're doing the right thing by waiting. Once you have undeniable evidence, we can move forward without risk. What do I do in the meantime?" She smiled tightly. "Act normal. Play the role she thinks you're still in. The more you keep your composure, the more she'll trip up." I nodded, the weight of the task settling on my shoulders. "I can do that." As I left her office, my phone buzzed. A message from Ryan, "Nicole knows." "What's in?" I froze. Nicole, Jack's wife. The thought of her knowing the truth, of her fury aligning with mine, sent a chill down my spine. A second message followed. She says it's time to turn the tables. I exhaled slowly. The game had just shifted. Emily and Jack thought they were the ones holding the cards, but they had no idea the deck was stacked against them now. I looked up at the sky, a storm brewing on the horizon. I was done being the trusting husband, the quiet bystander. The storm was coming, and I was ready to unleash it. The moment Emily left for her business trip, a hololight wrapped in a designer suitcase, I felt the air shift in the house. It was strange. The moment she walked out the door, it was like she took the facade of our life with her. What remained was cold, barren, stripped of all pretense. She left believing I was still the dutiful, oblivious husband. But she had no idea that the house she was walking away from was about to become unrecognizable by the time she returned. I took one last look around the living room, memories of our life flickering like ghosts. The couch where we watched movies, the dining table where we shared dinners and made half-hearted small talk. Every piece was a testament to the years I spent believing in a lie. But today, I wasn't going to drown in memories. Today, I was reclaiming my space. Ryan arrived early, his truck loaded with tools, tarps, and that unwavering look of resolve. He stepped into the house and gave me a curt nod, his eyes sweeping over the carefully curated decor that Emily had spent years obsessing over. "Ready for this?" he asked, his voice low and steady. I clenched my jaw. "More than ready." We started in the kitchen. The granite countertops that Emily had insisted on, for resale value, she'd said, were the first to go. Ryan handed me a sledgehammer, the weight of it familiar and solid in my hands. I swung it down, the satisfying crack of stone splitting beneath my rage reverberating through the room. Piece by piece, I dismantled everything I had built for her. The custom cabinets, the expensive backsplash, the ridiculous wine rack that held bottles she never drank, just displayed like trophies. Each blow was a release, every splintered fragment a symbol of taking back control. Ryan worked beside me, the rhythmic sounds of destruction filling the air like a dark symphony. He didn't say much, he didn't have to. His presence was a steady reminder that I wasn't doing this alone. We moved to the living room next. The sleek, modern shelving Emily had handpicked was unscrewed and disassembled with surgical precision. I stacked each piece methodically, a twisted satisfaction blooming in my chest. I wasn't smashing everything in blind rage. No, this was controlled, deliberate. Like a surgeon removing a cancerous tumor. Hours blurred together. We stripped the light fixtures from the ceilings, unscrewed the doorknobs, and rolled up the expensive rugs that Emily had spent weeks debating over. I moved through the house with cold efficiency, reclaiming every inch that she had touched with her deception. When we reached the master bedroom, the room where I had unknowingly slept beside a stranger, I paused. The air was heavy, charged with memories I wanted to burn. "Take your time," Ryan said softly, stepping back to give me space. I walked over to the bed, the sheets perfectly made, the pillows arranged just so. The sight of it, pristine and staged, made my stomach turn. This was the bed where she whispered lies, where she planned her betrayals with her boss and his secretary. I yanked the sheets off, the fabric tearing in my hands. The pillows hit the floor, and I kicked them aside, my breaths coming hard and fast. The headboard came next, the polished wood splintering as I pried it from the frame. By the time I was done, the bed was reduced to a skeletal frame, stripped of everything that made it ours. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the empty house, Ryan and I stood back to survey our work. The house was a hollow shell now, a reflection of the emptiness I felt in my chest. "You good?" Ryan asked, his voice careful. I nodded, a bitter smile curling my lips. "Yeah, I'm good." He clapped a hand on my shoulder. "She's gonna lose her mind when she sees this." "That's the point," I said. "I want her to feel what it's like to have everything ripped away." Ryan's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. "Nicole just sent me a message. She's ready." A dark satisfaction coiled in my gut. Nicole, Jack's wife, was the wild card I hadn't known I needed. She'd spent years suspecting, questioning, doubting, just like I had. And now, she was ready to unleash her own form of justice. "Tell her to go ahead," I said. "We're ready for the next move." That night, I sat alone in the skeletal remains of my living room, the quiet pressing in from all sides. I should have felt emptiness, grief, some kind of despair. But instead, there was a strange calm. The house had been a monument to a lie, and now, stripped down to its bare bones, it felt more honest than it ever had. My phone buzzed with a message from Ryan, "Phase 1 complete." "You did good." I stared at the screen, the words blurring for a moment. Then I typed back, "Phase 2 starts now." Emily thought she had built a future she could control, a web of lies where she held all the strings. But what she didn't know was that I'd already set fire to her web. And by the time she returned, all she'd find was ashes. If revenge is a dish best served cold, then planning it felt like cooking a gourmet meal in a meat locker. Every move had to be precise, calculated. And as I sat on the bare floor of what used to be my living room, surrounded by the ruins of my so-called life, I knew I was ready to turn up the heat. Emily's betrayal had gutted me, but it wasn't just her who deserved a reckoning. No, Jack, the charming, manipulative puppet master, had played his part far too well. It was time for him to choke on his own strings. And I knew just where to start. Jack's most prized possession wasn't his corner office or his immaculate suits, it was his car, a meticulously restored '67 Mustang Fastback in midnight blue. He called it Samantha, which was ironic considering his complete inability to be faithful to anything, including his wife. Nicole, Jack's wife, had told me about the car during one of our whispered phone calls. Her voice had cracked with restrained fury. "His damn Mustang means more to him than his family, Lucas. If you want to hurt him, you hit him where it'll bleed." Well, I was ready to make him bleed. I met Nicole at a small coffee shop across town. She wore oversized sunglasses and a trench coat that seemed to weigh her down more than the betrayal she carried. When she slid into the booth across from me, her jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitch. "You sure about this?" I asked, searching her face for hesitation. She pulled off her sunglasses, her eyes cold and clear. "Absolutely." She slid a set of keys across the table. "Jack's spare set." I picked them up, the metal cool against my palm. "You have someone who can do it?" she asked. "My brother Ryan. He knows guys who can handle this." "No traces, no evidence." She smiled, a thin, brittle thing. Good. I want him to feel what it's like to lose something he loves. Her voice wavered just a bit on the word love. I understood. We were both standing in the wreckage of something we'd once believed in. And now, all that was left was the need to strike back. After this, I said, there's no going back. Nicole's eyes sharpened. I don't want to go back. I want to watch it all burn. That night, under the cover of darkness, Ryan and his crew rolled up to Jack's house. The Mustang sat in the driveway, gleaming under the moonlight, oblivious to its impending doom. Ryan shot me a look, the kind that asked, "Are you really sure?" I answered with a nod. I was beyond sure. I was resolute. The crew got to work in practiced silence. With surgical precision, they dismantled Jack's beloved Mustang. Each piece, every bolt, every panel, every emblem was removed carefully, methodically. No vandalism, no anger-driven destruction. This wasn't a smash job, it was an autopsy. An hour in, the driveway was a macabre puzzle of auto parts, laid out in perfect order, like an exhibit for the world's most tragic car enthusiast. I stood back, the chill of the night seeping into my bones. There was something poetic about it. Jack had stripped my life apart piece by piece. Now, his most treasured possession was reduced to a pile of metal, rubber, and glass. As Ryan's team packed up their tools, one of the guys handed me the Mustang's hood ornament, a chrome pony, sleek and proud. I turned it over in my hands, its weight oddly satisfying. "Leave it on the windshield," I said. "Like a signature." Ryan grinned. "You got it." He placed the ornament delicately on what used to be the windshield frame, the metal catching the moonlight one last time. We left the driveway like ghosts, vanishing into the night. The next morning, the fallout began. My phone buzzed with a message from Nicole. "He's losing it." Screaming in the driveway. "Neighbors are filming." I clicked the video she sent. Jack was on his knees, his face contorted in rage and disbelief, surrounded by the remains of his precious Mustang. His fists pounded the concrete, his screams incoherent. It was a raw, primal meltdown, the kind of breakdown that stripped away his carefully crafted facade. A grim satisfaction settled in my chest. He was unraveling, and it was beautiful to watch. The video spread like wildfire. Social media loves a public humiliation, especially when it involves a man who thought he was untouchable. Jack's colleagues, his clients, even his friends, all of them saw the mighty attorney reduced to a sobbing mess in his driveway. The comments were ruthless. "Guess money can't buy dignity." "Midlife crisis just hit DEFCON 1. Hope he kept a receipt for that therapy session." I leaned back in my chair, a bitter smile on my lips. Jack thought he could destroy lives and walk away unscathed. But now he knew actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences come wrapped in chrome and leather. Later that evening, Nicole called. "It worked," she said, her voice trembling. "He's broken." "Are you okay?" I asked, suddenly feeling the weight of what we'd done. She paused. "Not yet. But I will be." We shared a silence, the kind that only people who've survived betrayal can understand. "Thank you, Lucas," she whispered. "Don't thank me," I said. "We're just getting started." That night, as I lay on the mattress in the stripped-down remains of my bedroom, I felt something close to peace. It wasn't justice, not yet, but it was a start. Jack's world was starting to crack, and Emily's turn was coming. I closed my eyes, the image of Jack's shattered pride burning behind my eyelids. This was only the beginning. The reckoning was far from over. The airport was a theater of chaos, all hustle, bustle, and oblivious strangers caught up in their own lives. Perfect. Because today, amidst all the travelers trying to get from point A to point B, a different kind of baggage was about to be unloaded, publicly and unapologetically. Emily's flight was due to land at 3:15 p.m. I tracked it, watched its progress on my phone like a hunter stalking prey. My stomach twisted, but it wasn't nerves. It was anticipation. Months of betrayal, days of calculated vengeance, it was all leading to this moment. Nicole was with me, wearing dark sunglasses and a trench coat that seemed to broadcast "Don't talk to me." Beside her stood Ryan, arms crossed, his expression grim but determined. This wasn't just my moment. This was our moment. "She deserves this," Nicole said, her voice low, almost a growl. "They all do." I nodded. "They're going to get everything they deserve." Ryan glanced at his watch. "You ready?" "More than ready." The plan was simple but devastating. Emily, Jack, and Veronica would walk off that plane thinking they were returning from their little pleasure trip unnoticed. Instead, they were about to be met with the cold slap of reality and the legal consequences of their own actions. I felt the heat of rage simmering under my skin, but my face was a mask of calm. I wasn't going to scream, rant, or lose control. No, my revenge was served in ice-cold sheets of legal paper. The sound of my heart pounding filled my ears as passengers began streaming through the arrival's gate. Businessmen with tired eyes. Parents wrangling children. Lovers reuniting with tight embraces. And then, there they were. Emily emerged first, dragging her sleek, designer suitcase behind her. Her face was lit up with a false glow of satisfaction. Jack walked beside her, his suit rumpled from the flight but his arrogance intact. Veronica trailed behind, her sharp eyes scanning the crowd like she expected to be admired wherever she went. They looked happy. Smug. Like they had just gotten away with murder. A bitter laugh rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Not yet. The show was just beginning. As they passed through the gate, I stepped forward, my eyes locking onto Emily's. It took a second for recognition to flicker in her gaze. Her confident stride faltered. Her smile slipped just a fraction. "Lucas," she said, her voice tinged with confusion. "What are you?" She didn't get to finish. From the corner of my eye, I saw Nicole step in front of Jack. He barely had time to blink before she raised her hand and slapped him across the face, a resounding crack that echoed through the terminal. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jack stumbled back, his hand flying to his cheek, eyes wide with shock. "You bastard!" Nicole's voice rang out, loud and clear. "Did you really think you could screw around with my life and get away with it?" Jack's mouth flapped open and shut, but no words came out. The crowd began to gather, travelers pausing to watch the spectacle unfold. Phones appeared, cameras recording. This was better than reality TV. Emily turned to me, her face draining of color. "Lucas, let's talk about this privately." I smiled, a cold, mirthless thing. "Oh, we're past private conversations, Emily." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the stack of papers, divorce filings, complete with irrefutable evidence of her infidelity. I held them out to her. "You've been served." Her hands shook as she took the papers, her eyes darting over the legal jargon, the bold accusations, the damning facts. Her face crumpled. "Lucas, please. We can fix this." I leaned in close, my voice a whisper of steel. "We can't fix something that's been rotting for years." Meanwhile, Veronica wasn't faring much better. Her husband, Bill, a tall man with a quiet, simmering rage, appeared at her side. His face was a mask of barely contained fury. He thrust a suitcase into her hands, his voice cold and clipped. "Here are your things. You're not welcome at home anymore." Veronica's eyes widened. "Bill, wait." No, his voice cracked. "We're done." She stood there, stunned, clutching the suitcase like it was the last piece of her life that hadn't crumbled. Jack's eyes darted wildly between Emily and Veronica. His empire of deceit was crumbling before his eyes, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. Nicole took a step back, her voice clear and commanding. "I hope you both enjoyed your little trip. Because it's the last one you'll be taking together." The crowd was fully invested now. Some people whispered in shock. Others openly filmed, their faces lit with anticipation. I didn't care. Let the world see this. Let the world know the truth. Emily's eyes filled with tears, her voice cracking. Lucas, you don't have to do this. I looked at her, the woman I'd once loved, the woman who dismantled our life piece by piece with every lie she told. Emily, I didn't do this. You did. With that, I turned on my heel and walked away. Ryan and Nicole flanked me, our footsteps purposeful, our heads held high. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The sounds of their world collapsing behind me were enough. As we exited the terminal, Ryan let out a low whistle. That was one hell of a show. Nicole wiped a tear from her cheek, her voice soft but steady. It's not over for them. Not by a long shot. I nodded, my jaw set. No. But it's over for us. The sun was setting outside the airport, casting long shadows over the pavement. It felt like the end of a chapter, the final, brutal punctuation mark on a story I hadn't asked to be part of. But as I took a deep breath, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. The storm had passed. The wreckage was behind me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The days after the airport confrontation were a surreal mix of chaos and clarity. The dust hadn't just settled, it had exploded and scattered in every direction. But strangely, standing in the aftermath, I felt more grounded than I had in years. Emily's world was unraveling rapidly, each thread she'd used to weave her double life snapping under the weight of her lies. Jack wasn't faring any better. The viral videos of his meltdown, the confrontation at the airport, and the very public slap from Nicole had done irreparable damage to his pristine image. The once dignified attorney was now a laughingstock, memes spreading faster than wildfire. And Veronica? Her social circle was in flames. Bill, her now ex-husband, didn't stop at divorce papers. He sent out emails to her colleagues, friends, and family, each one detailing her part in the sordid affair. Her reputation was in ruins, a pile of ashes she couldn't rebuild. As for me, my own life had taken a sharp turn, but I was still standing. The evidence Ryan and I had gathered, combined with the legal assault orchestrated by my lawyer Kate, had ensured that Emily's bid for any of our assets was laughable. The house was mine. The savings were mine. She walked away with her suitcase and the bitter taste of her own betrayal. Of course, the fallout came with a price. The firm where I'd worked for the last 10 years decided to distance themselves from my personal drama. A polite way of saying I was fired for daring to drag a respected attorney's name through the mud, even though he was the one who deserved to be buried in it. I packed up my desk without a word, the sterile smell of the office mingling with the metallic taste of resentment on my tongue. But as I carried the box of my belongings out the door, I realized something. This wasn't a loss. It was freedom. I didn't want to work for people who valued reputation over justice. I didn't want to be tied to a place that saw betrayal as something to sweep under the rug. No, I was done being part of someone else's lie. That evening, I sat in my living room, the bare walls and stripped furniture no longer feeling empty but full of potential. My phone buzzed. It was Ryan. Hey, bro. You doing okay? I took a deep breath. Yeah, I think I am. He paused. Listen, I talked to a few people. Word's getting around about what happened. A lot of guys respect what you did, how you kept your head and nailed those bastards to the wall. Good to know, I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. More than that, Ryan continued. Nicole's been talking to some of her contacts. She's got a friend who runs a financial consulting firm. They need someone sharp. She's vouching for you. I sat up, a spark of hope flaring in my chest. Seriously? Yeah. And Lucas? These people get it. They're not corporate drones. They know the difference between right and wrong. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight of uncertainty lift. A new beginning wasn't just possible, it was within reach. Tell her I'm in. You'll tell her yourself, Ryan chuckled. Dinner at her place tomorrow. You owe her a thank you. I smiled. I'll be there. The next day, I found myself in Nicole's sleek, modern kitchen, the scent of roasted chicken and garlic filling the air. She handed me a glass of wine, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. To surviving the storm, she said, raising her glass. To rebuilding from the wreckage, I replied, clinking my glass against hers. We drank, the bitterness of the past washed away by the smooth, dry red. For a moment, we just stood there, two people who had been through hell and come out the other side, scarred but not broken. You know, Nicole said, her voice thoughtful, I think we were meant to cross paths. I nodded. Sometimes you find the right people in the worst circumstances. A hint of a smile touched her lips. Here's to better circumstances, then. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, things began to shift. The consulting firm took me on, and for the first time in years, I felt valued for who I was, not for who I pretended to be. Ryan and I spent weekends working on projects around the house, each repair a metaphor for rebuilding my life. Emily tried to reach out once, a pitiful text message that read, "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before deleting it without a response. There was nothing left to say. Jack's career crumbled, his clients dropping him one by one. He moved out of state, a disgraced man clinging to the scraps of his former life. I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd earned every ounce of his misery. One afternoon, I found myself standing in my garage, staring at the empty space where my life had once felt boxed in. The air smelled like sawdust and fresh beginnings. Ryan walked in, wiping his hands on a rag. Thinking about what's next. Yeah, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. For the first time, I think I'm ready for it. He grinned. Then let's build something new. I nodded, feeling the past finally loosen its grip on me. The wreckage was behind me, and ahead was an open road. A new beginning, a new life, and this time, it was mine alone to shape. The storm had passed, and in its wake, there was silence, the kind of silence that settles after a battle is won, when the air is still heavy with smoke, but the chaos is gone. I stood at the edge of my life, staring into the horizon of what lay ahead. For the first time in months, the unknown felt less like a threat and more like an invitation. Emily was gone. Jack was gone. Their wreckage no longer cluttered my path. But that didn't mean I was done. No, closure wasn't just about removing the poison, it was about rebuilding, learning to trust the world again, learning to trust myself. I found myself back in Dr. Morgan's office, the room bathed in the soft glow of afternoon sunlight. I hadn't been here since everything exploded, but now it felt right to return, like a final piece of unfinished business. Dr. Morgan adjusted his glasses and leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. You've been through a lot, Lucas. How are you feeling now? I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs in a way that felt clean. Lighter, I admitted. Like I finally dropped a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying. He nodded. That's progress. But what about the anger? I smiled, a genuine, almost bittersweet smile. It's still there, but it doesn't control me anymore. I think I realized that anger wasn't my enemy, it was a sign. A sign that I deserved better. That I had a right to fight for myself. Dr. Morgan's eyes crinkled at the corners. That's a powerful realization. So what comes next? I let the question hang in the air for a moment, feeling the possibilities stretch out before me. Next? I said finally. I rebuild. Not just my career or my home, but my life. On my terms this time. Walking out of that office felt different than before. I wasn't leaving with questions or confusion. I was walking out with purpose. I headed straight to my favorite coffee shop, the one where Emily and I used to go before everything soured. The barista recognized me, her smile warm but tentative. Hey, Lucas. Haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, I said, returning her smile. Been sorting things out. She handed me my coffee, a black brew, no frills, no sugar. Strong and straightforward. Well, it's good to see you back. As I sipped, the bitterness was a comfort. I glanced around the cafe, the hum of conversations, the clink of spoons against mugs. Life went on. And so would I. Later that evening, I stood in front of my house. The renovations Ryan and I had started were nearly complete. The place looked different now. Cleaner. Brighter. The shadows of the past had been swept away, replaced with something honest. Ryan walked up beside me, wiping his hands on his jeans. Well, the roof's not gonna leak anymore. I'd say that's a win. I chuckled. Yeah, it is. He paused, his eyes narrowing with mischief. You ever gonna throw a housewarming party, or are you just gonna keep standing out here, brooding like Batman? I laughed, a real laugh, one that came from a place that hadn't felt joy in a long time. Maybe it's time. He clapped me on the back. Good. You deserve a fresh start. As he walked back to his truck, I took one last look at the house. It wasn't just walls and a roof, it was a symbol of everything I'd survived. A reminder that even when life burns down around you, you can rebuild. Stronger. Smarter. Wiser. The next day, I stood in front of a judge, finalizing the divorce. Emily was there, but I barely looked at her. She was a specter of a past I no longer needed. When the judge stamped the papers, a finality settled in my bones. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Emily called my name. I turned slowly, my face calm. Lucas, she said, her voice strained. I'm sorry. I tilted my head, studying her. The woman who had once been my everything now looked small, diminished by her own choices. I hope you figure yourself out, Emily, I said. But I'm done being part of your story. I turned away, walking toward freedom, leaving her behind with her apologies, her regrets, her wreckage. That evening, I joined Nicole and Ryan for dinner. The table was filled with laughter, the kind that only comes from surviving the worst and finding your way back to the light. To new beginnings, Nicole said, raising her glass. To leaving the past where it belongs, Ryan added. I lifted my glass, the warmth of friendship, resilience, and hope filling me. To closure, I said. And to whatever comes next. The glasses clinked, and for the first time in a long while, I felt it, not just hope, but peace. The storm was over. The reckoning complete. And as I looked ahead, I knew one thing for sure, I was ready for the future.